Subcommittee will come to order. Thank you for being here, gentlemen and ladies. Nice to see you. Today we're going to be marking up 10 bills, several of which I'll be asking unanimous consent to consider in block. All these bills were considered at a legislative hearing in this subcommittee. I'm supportive of the bills on today's agenda as they're important measures that will improve the lives of veterans and their families by modernizing the GI Bill program, providing additional resources to disabled veterans, and improving, the VA home loan program. Several of these bills are the product of bipartisan negotiations. I hope everyone in the subcommittee will support these bills and continue to work together to address the concerns as we move forward in the legislative process. In accordance with committee rules, the subcommittee has contacted the Congressional Budget Office seeking informal preliminary cost estimates for each of the bills being considered. Many of these preliminary scores are only a range of potential costs because the subcommittee has not received official cost estimates on the bills from the Congressional Budget Office. None of these bills being considered today include the offsets that will be necessary to move these bills forward in the legislative process. However, as we work to refine the list of bills that will be considered at full committee markup and bills that may be considered on the House floor, we will need to find offsets to ensure that we are in accordance with House rules. We want to make sure that we're not passing legislation that will increase the debt and burden the American taxpayer, of which our veterans are also American taxpayers. Let's never forget that. I should note that there are still multiple opportunities to improve and make necessary changes to these bills. The ranking member and I will continue to work with our colleagues in the committee and any stakeholders that have feedback on these bills as we continue to work through the legislative process. I'm very proud of the nonpartisan nature of this committee, and it will continue in that way under my leadership and in the leadership of Ranking Member Pappas. One of these bills that we are considering is my solution to help veterans that have gotten behind on their mortgages and cannot catch up by refinancing due to the high interest rates in the current market. These veterans on average owe less than $20,000 in arrearances. And I believe that partial claim fix offers a fiscally responsible solution that is in line with other government agencies. With the administration's recent change to the VASP program, it's more important than ever that we act now to provide options for veterans. What this does simply is it aligns the Veterans Affairs Administration with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That's all it's doing. We're leveling the bubbles across all of the government programs where you can borrow money, and I think that is prudent. Several of these improvements have been addressed in my amendment in the nature of a substitute today to make sure we get this right. I look forward to continuing to work with stakeholders and the minority to get this through committee and acted as soon as possible so that veterans have access to the support they might need. One of the other bills under consideration today is my bill to improve veterans' experience on college campuses. My bill would make it easier to hire individuals to fill VSOC positions on college campuses nationwide, as there is currently a dearth of them. I look forward to working with the ranking member on these bills being marked up today to ensure that we're doing the right thing for the veterans. And I'd now like to recognize my great friend, Mr. Pappas, for any open remarks he may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to be with you, and thanks for holding today's markup. I want to commend you for the productive bipartisan discussion we had during last month's legislative hearing, but I think we can't ignore a step that VA took just 6 days ago. VA and DOJ unilaterally ended the Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program, which is a critical home loan assistance program that serves an estimated 15,000 veterans today. The abrupt ending of VAFs will have a devastating impact on veterans. Thousands of vets and their families are at risk of losing their homes. There's no question about that, especially as there's no functional alternative in place or one that's expected to be signed into law anytime soon. Last week, VA suddenly announced the end of VASP. This committee recognizes that there are issues with VASP. We've held hearings and have been working on this, but for VA to unilaterally end the program without bipartisan legislation having been drafted and discussed by our committee is, I believe, cruel and disrespectful to veterans who are already facing financial challenges. So let's be clear, this is not a partisan issue. Like you, Mr. Chairman, I don't care who's in the White House. If the Biden administration made the same decision, I would be just as upset. This is about policy and the best solutions to ensure that veterans are protected to avoid foreclosure. And now that VASP has been ended, that's got to be a focus of ours jointly. So I understand the chairman's perspective on this. I do not oppose the underlying concept and the need to codify a new partial claims program, especially now that the administration has ended VASP. But I do want to recognize that VA already guarantees lenders are made whole when a loan defaults. While some may think ending VASP will be good for VA's bottom line, it does not reduce VA's financial risks because ending VASP simply ensures that lenders are more likely to foreclose without doing anything to make VA financially stable. So finally, ending VASP in this fashion actually makes passing an alternative a little bit more difficult because of budgeting rules at CBO. So despite how disappointed I am, I do want to recognize that there are a number of bills that are under consideration today that I believe will gain significant bipartisan support. One that I want to bring attention to that will be considered en bloc is H.R. 1423, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act of 2025, sponsored by Congressman Levin. He's been working on this for some time. We hope that everyone here will support this bill and help get it passed for the sake of our National Guard and reservists. This legislation will allow members of the Guard and Reserves who are more frequently required to take on the same role as our active duty service members to earn GI Bill benefits at the same rate as their active duty counterparts. This issue has been allowed to continue for far too long without resolution, and I've heard from both Granite State Guard and Reserve members about this for years. So I know the veterans community has been asking for this redress for some time. Everyone recognizes this bill is the right thing to do, and I'm proud to support Congressman Levin in this effort. So we've got a lot to discuss today concerning the legislation on the docket. I will end my remarks here so we can get back to business, and I thank you very much for your leadership, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back, and hey, I got to tell you, Mike did a heck of a job. He was your predecessor, and I have Volk Field and Fort McCoy in my district, and everything we can do to support our reservists and National Guards, we must. We have to remember that 6 out of the last 8 casualties sustained by the Department of Defense in combat operations were reservists. And the enemy doesn't care if you're a reservist or National Guard or active duty. They're aiming at the flag on your shoulder. So this... increasingly relying on them. Yeah, we are. And so I'm very proud to do this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask right now unanimous consent to consider and block the following bills that do not have amendments. H.R. 913, the Streamlining Aviation for Eligible Veterans Act of 2025. H.R. 980, the Modernizing of Veterans On-Campus Experience Act of 2025. And H.R. 1423, Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act of 2025. Hearing no objection, so ordered. The clerk shall report the bills.
H.R. 913, to amend Title 38 United States Code to authorize the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to approve.
The bills were circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. I ask the reading of the bills be dispensed with and the bills be open to amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for a statement on H.R. 980, which is included in the en bloc. One of my bills, 980, H.R. 980, is under consideration today would improve the veterans' experience on college campuses. My bill will make it easier to hire individuals to fill VSOC positions on campuses nationwide. And currently, there's a massive wait time across the nation. And in my district, the current wait time to see a counselor is around 24 days, which is completely unacceptable. My bill would allow more counselors to be hired by VSOC positions by only requiring a bachelor's degree for these jobs versus the current requirement of a master's degree. I'm also pleased to see my good friend and colleague, Mr. Levin's bill, as I discussed earlier, 1423 in this en bloc. It's just the right thing to do by our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Space Force Guardians. I think that's what they call themselves. I look forward to working with the minority to improve this bill and identify needed offsets to provide parity for our Guard and Guard and reservists. Do any other members wish to speak on the en bloc? The chair now recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you, Chairman. I plan to support the en bloc package. The package contains the bill I just referenced before, H.R. 1423, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, which is a top priority of VSOs. We've been close to passing this into law in prior Congresses. I hope we get this across the finish line this year. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to any of these bills? Hearing none, I now recognize Mr. Pappas for a motion.
Chairman, I move that H.R. 913, H.R. 980, and H.R. 1423 be forwarded favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward the bills included in the en bloc to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bills H.R. 913, H.R. 980, and H.R. 1423 are favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now ask unanimous consent to consider en bloc the amendments in the nature of a substitute for each of the following bills that were included in the notice for markup. An amendment in the nature of the substitute to H.R. 1364, the Automotive Support Services to Improve Safe Transportation Act of 2025. An amendment in the nature of the substitute to H.R. 1527, the Reforming Education for Veterans Act. An amendment in the nature of the substitute to H.R. 1793, the Veterans Readiness and Employment Transparency Act of 2025. And an amendment in the nature of the substitute to H.R. 1872, the Fairness in Veterans Education Act. Hearing no objections, so ordered. The clerk shall report the bills.
H.R. 1364, to amend Title 38 United States Code to provide clarification.
The bills are circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. I ask the reading of the bills be dispensed and the bills be open to amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. Do any members wish to comment on the bills? The chair now recognizes Mr. Amade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1793, the Veterans Readiness and Employment Transparency Act. As a veteran who served our nation in uniform, I understand firsthand the challenges our heroes face when transitioning to civilian life. The Veterans Readiness and Employment Program is vital for veterans with service-connected disabilities, but many call it VA's best kept secret, but not in a good way. Now, the data is concerning. In Phoenix, which serves many veterans from Arizona's 8th District, the average wait time to see a VRNE counselor is 68 days. That's over 2 months of waiting for critical career assistance. Nationwide, wait times range from 2 weeks to an astounding 158 days. Now, this amendment in the nature of a substitute addresses these problems through straightforward solutions. First, it establishes a dedicated VRNE telephone hotline within VA's Education Call Center. Second, it requires each regional office to post contact information online for VRNE inquiries. Third, it mandates monthly Q&A sessions for school certifying officials. Fourth, it ensures veterans receive prompt decisions on extension requests within 30 days. And fifth, it increases accountability through annual reporting to Congress. Now, this is personal. I served, and I know from friends and constituents what the transition feels like for disabled veterans. And I know it can be either a launch pad or a free fall, depending on the support you get. This amendment, in the nature of a substitute, is fiscally responsible. It doesn't throw money at a broken system, but demands better outcomes and holds the VA accountable. I want to thank Chairman and the more than a dozen colleagues from both sides of the aisle who co-sponsored this common sense legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment in the nature of a substitute, and to show our veterans that when we say thank you for your service, we mean it. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Do any other members wish to comment? The chair now recognizes Ranking Member Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for advancing these 4 bills to the full committee. I support these measures and want to thank the members and staff for their work preparing the proposals for passage. I look forward to further work in the full committee, and I urge members to support the en-bloc package and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Barrett for any comments he may wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. And Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Pappas and members of the subcommittee, appreciate your willingness to take up this important slate of bills in this package today. Before us right now is one of my bills, H.R. 1364, the Automotive Support Services to Improve Safe Transportation Act, or ASSIST Act for short. Proud to lead on this bipartisan legislation with Representative Goodlander from New Hampshire, and excited to see this bill on the agenda for today's markup. This bill will ensure that disabled veterans, with help from the Department of Veterans Affairs, are empowered to make vehicle modifications they need to travel safely. Specifically, this bill will give the VA greater flexibility to offer financial assistance for a wider range of medically necessary vehicle adaptations that will improve a veteran's quality of life. The technology on this continues to advance, and we want to make sure that the VA is meeting the needs of the veterans in the best way that we can. Currently, the VA is restricted to funding only a limited list of adaptive equipment, leaving out a fair number of things that would improve the livelihoods of our veterans, such as right now they can only fund wheelchair tie-downs, van lifts, and raised roofs, but there are a host of other adaptations that are necessary to give our veterans the appropriate quality of life that they've earned. This unintentional limitation in many cases prevents altogether some veterans from being able to make necessary modifications to their vehicles, such as ramp and kneeling systems, mobility device lifts, and ingress and egress accessibility modifications. The ASSIST Act will fix this gap in assistance and would help ensure veterans are able to continue traveling safely and freely. My bill builds off the foundation that the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022 laid that a prior Congress took up, which allowed veterans to apply for multiple vehicles throughout their lives, not just one single vehicle. This bill demonstrated the change was needed to support our disabled veterans, and now in 2025, further change is needed. My bill brings about and fixes those restrictions on automotive equipment. It's a common sense fix that removes bureaucratic red tape and ensures our disabled veterans can access the vehicle modifications they need. I know we all agree that no veteran should be denied essential mobility assistance because of an outdated government list. I'm excited to offer this bill today, and I urge my colleagues to vote yea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. There's an amendment in the nature of a substitute to each of these bills that is considered base text for the purpose of markup without objection. So ordered. Do any members wish to offer any further amendments to any of the amendments in the nature of a substitute? That's a very confusing statement, isn't it? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to each of the amendments in the nature of a substitute included in the en bloc. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Mr. Pappas for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that H.R. 1364 as amended, H.R. 1527 as amended, H.R. 1793 as amended, and H.R. 1872 as amended be forwarded favorably to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward the bills as amended, including in the en bloc, to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bills H.R. 1364, H.R. 1527, H.R. 1793, and H.R. 1872 as amended are favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call upon H.R. 1458, the Vets Opportunity Act of 2025. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1458, to amend Title 38 United States Code to modify the criteria for approval of
The
certain...
bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules, and without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I recognize myself for a brief comment on the bill. This bill is going to expand the GI Bill, including independent study programs offered in person or hybrid. And traditionally, when someone thinks of using a GI Bill, they only think it can be used for a four-year institution. And however, veterans deserve to have the options for schooling, including non-traditional paths, as many of them balance their education with caring for their families or a spouse. The bill would provide veterans with the flexibility to get an education while working or caring for their families. I would also like to give veterans the opportunity to fill much-needed jobs in the American manufacturing economy. The tradesmen and women of this country built this nation. Let's not forget that. And those are union and non-union tradesmen and women. And we have to do everything we possibly can to build the trades so they can continue to build America. I thank my friend and colleague, Representative Subcommittee, for introducing the bill with bipartisan support, and with that, I yield back. Do any members wish to comment on the bill H.R. 1458? The chair now recognizes Mr. Subcommittee from the great state of Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nearly 80,000 veterans call my district home, and as a member of this subcommittee, I take great pride in being able to work with my colleagues here in bipartisan fashion to find creative solutions to problems that they face. One of those solutions is my bill, H.R. 1458, the Veterans Education and Technical Skills Opportunity Act, or the VETS Act of 2025, which is before us here today. This bipartisan bill aims to expand veterans' access to educational opportunities for in-demand skilled trades and vocational programs. Specifically, it would extend post-9/11 GI Bill educational benefits to include hybrid versions of skilled trade training programs. Across the country, the educational environment continues to grow more and more flexible with hybrid and online learning. So we must ensure we meet our veterans where they are in their educational journey. Not only does this improve the way our veterans access their benefits, but it further leverages the diverse array of educational institutions, which will help tackle the current workforce shortage, skilled training here in trades in the U.S. I'm proud of the bipartisan nature of this bill, and thank my colleagues who supported it in the 118th as well as in the 119th Congress, and look forward to supporting it again here in full committee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member Pappas for any comments he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to share my concern with H.R. 1458, the Vets Opportunity Act of 2025. I understand this subcommittee advanced the proposal last year, and while I support its passage today, we can't ignore what's happening at the U.S. Department of Education. The agency has been stripped down to a bare-bones operation, and student loan oversight has been moved to the Small Business Administration. Considering H.R. 1458 relies on student loan oversight measures, this committee deserves answers on how federal student loans will be managed without a Department of Education. Without these answers, legislation like H.R. 1458 will either have no effect or, even worse, could enable some of the worst actors in higher education to prey on GI Bill benefits. So I'll support this legislation today, but I hope our full committee can work to get answers before bringing this legislation to the House floor. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. No amendments were filed. Are there any amendments? Hearing none, I now recognize Mr. Barrett for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee forward H.R. 1458 favorably to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1458. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1458 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. We're good to go. Without objection, I'm sorry. We'll now move to H.R. 1815, the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1815, to amend Title 38 United States Code to authorize the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to take certain actions in the case of a default on a home loan.
The bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. Hearing no objections, so ordered. I recognize myself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1815, offered by Mr. Van Orden of Wisconsin.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with. I ask that it will be considered as base text for the purpose of the markup, and without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The amendment in the nature of the substitute will make changes to the termination date and remove the interest rate on partial claims assigned to the bill with other federal home loan programs. And this amendment in the nature of a substitute would give the VA the authority to create a partial claims program to help veterans get back on track with their payments. Moving this bill forward through the subcommittee is essential with the administration's recent phase out of the VAST program, as my friend mentioned earlier. Veterans deserve to have loss mitigation protocols in place that other federal loans offer. And at the same time, taxpayers deserve to be protected from the financial risks of VASP. So last Congress, the previous administration sought to solve a $25,000 mortgage delinquency by expending, on average, $320,000. So just put this like really simply, the average veteran was like $25,000 in arrears, but the Veterans Affairs Administration, under the previous administration, bought the entire loan for $320,000 on average for a tune of like $5.5 billion, is that correct? And without congressional authority. So we had some unelected bureaucrats that invented a program that has not existed since someone lent someone seashells to buy a cave. They just invented this program, and to solve a $25,000 problem, as bureaucrats normally do, they expended $320,000. And they did that across the board. And so this is just not how you run a railroad. And again, it contravened the will of Congress. Mr. Pappas and I are members of a co-equal branch of government along with the executive branch, and this simply has to stop because it is just not okay. I do support the removal of this vast program for the reasons that I just said. It doesn't make sense. And again, I can't stress this enough. This program has never existed in any form like the Veterans Affairs Administration just made it up, sitting around a campfire drinking beers one day. It's just foolish, and it doesn't make any sense. And it contravenes the will of Congress. I also support the solution for veterans still in arrears through my partial claims legislation. So we're not going to throw anybody out of their homes. Mr. Pappas's #1 legislative priority is to prevent veterans homelessness. And so we're not going to do something to increase veterans homelessness because I respect him as a professional. So I don't want this to be misconstrued. What we're trying to do is making sure that every current veteran and every future veteran has access to the VA Home Loan Guarantee Program. And if this VASP continues, the entire program is in jeopardy of being destroyed. And I am unwilling under my chairmanship to allow that to happen on my watch. We're just not going to do it. I want every veteran, every active duty service member, and every future veteran that decides to defend the country by putting their body in between a bullet and us, I want them to be able to buy a home. And what we're doing is we're playing the long game here by guaranteeing this program is in existence in perpetuity. And that's incredibly important that we do that. And I do understand that some people have concerns with it, but I do not. And I am a veteran, and I've used the VA Home Loan Program to buy homes, to put shelter over my children's head. Do any members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of the substitute for HR 1815, I'm going to guess Mr. Pappas does.
Well, I'd like to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute if I could. I don't know if this is the right time for that.
I now recognize Ranking Member Pappas to offer a substitute amendment, number 1,
Okay.
to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
All right, I have an amendment at the desk to the ANS.
Substitute for the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 1815, offered by Mr. Pappas.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment will be dispensed with, and without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is now recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the evening of April 3rd, 2025, Chairman Bost announced that Secretary Collins, with the support of the Trump administration, ended the VASP program with no details whatsoever. It's clear that the Secretary is choosing to use his authority to end a program that was helping many veterans avoid foreclosure and stay in their homes. Because VA loans are government-backed loans, the VA must intervene and act on behalf of veterans facing financial difficulties. The amendment clarifies that VA Secretary's obligation to act on behalf of veterans in danger of being foreclosed on. Therefore, when Secretary Collins announced that VASP was abruptly ending without other alternatives such as partial claims in place, he was not acting in the best interests of veterans. So we must reinstate VASP immediately before any veterans face irreparable harm that comes with foreclosure. At the very least, VASP should remain as a stopgap measure until an appropriate partial claims program is established. So let me be clear, I do not oppose a partial claims program. We must all recognize that the way that Secretary Collins ended VASP will result in our work in Congress being much more difficult to pass a partial claims alternative into law because of CBO scoring and other issues. The responsible thing is for VA to reverse course immediately, support the amendment that will send a clear message to VA that VASP is a critical resource for veterans in the short term to be used until Congress can grant VA additional authorities. So I urge support for my amendment to immediately reinstate VASP, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and I recognize myself in opposition to Mr. Pappas' amendment, and I have great respect for you. And the reason being is that your amendment would effectively destroy the partial claims thing that we're trying to get done. And I know that there's veterans that are in arrears. You know that there's veterans in arrears. But what we have to do is make sure that the VA home loan program is available in perpetuity. And again, the VA wrote a $5.48 billion check without our authorization. And that's not okay. And what they're looking for is $16 billion without our authorization. We're explicitly clear with the undersecretaries that are here that, first and foremost, they invented this program out of thin air, and they already spent $5.5 billion on this program, the VASP program, with directly contravening the will of Congress, and they want an additional like $11 billion. And so we can't do that. We have to, you and me and the rest of these cats over here, we have to rein back the power from these unelected bureaucrats that everybody's, that's a phrase that everyone likes to use lately, get it back so that we can make sure that these programs are available in perpetuity. That is my goal, sir. So the 15-year-old right now that's contemplating joining the service, and they can join at 17 with parents' permission, 18 without it, I want them to know that one of the benefits that they're going to receive by defending our country is the ability to exercise the VA home loan program. That's the intent. So I would, again, I oppose your amendment, sir, because it would kill the partial claims program. And with that, I yield back. And you and me work great together. And I want to continue to do that. And I agree, we need to make sure that we inject certainty. And maybe we need to talk about some messaging things for our folks, how the word gets out. But I'm totally stoked to work with you to make sure that our veterans don't have additional stress. They already have enough on them. Cool? All right, thank you, sir. So I do urge my colleagues to vote no with me on this amendment. Do any members want to comment on the substitute amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute? Wow. Okay, seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Pappas substitute amendment number 1 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it and the amendment is not agreed to. Mr. Pappas has requested a recorded vote, and pursuant to committee rules, it'll be postponed to the end. Thank you. I now recognize Ranking Member Pappas to offer a substitute amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a second amendment to the ANS at the desk.
Substitute for the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1815, offered by Mr. Pappas. Strike all after the...
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to be clear here. The actions from VA last week will end VASP, and it will result in veterans losing their homes. We know this. We've heard from veterans, VSOs, lenders, and housing advocates telling us that this is the case. So that's why I'm offering another amendment here to the legislation as a form of a compromise with the majority. My amendment would immediately reinstate the VASP program and include a trigger into the law that should the House work its will, find the necessary offsets, negotiate resolutions with the Senate, and pass partial claims into law, that VASP would sunset. I believe this is the responsible thing to do. If the chairman believes VASP should end, this amendment provides a path for us to get there, but it avoids delaying assistance to veterans facing foreclosure until a viable alternative is in place. So I urge all members, Democrats and Republicans, to join me on this reasonable approach. Please support this amendment, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. This amendment, in the nature of a substitute, strikes my partial claims bill and replaces the language with implementation of the VASP program until a partial claims program is implemented. This amendment, in the nature of a substitute, is identical to the partial claims bill the minority introduced last year in the House. And since then, we've worked in a bipartisan manner with stakeholders and made substantive changes that are reflected in my ANS amendment in the nature of a substitute that are not in this substitute amendment. This language also creates a permanent partial claim bill. Under leadership protocols, we're not able to authorize a permanent partial claims bill, and this would be a poison pill to my legislation. I appreciate the minority's concern to make sure veterans have another option since the VASP program is removed. However, my partial claims bill is the only viable way forward, as no other individual in either the House or the Senate has any legislation on partial claims. And again, all we are doing with this partial claims bill is aligning the Veterans Affairs Administration's home loan guarantee program with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So we are literally leveling the bubbles so that if you're a veteran or not a veteran, you understand what the rules of the road are. And I think it's very prudent. So I look forward to working with Ranking Member Pappas again in order to move this bill forward, and for these reasons, I strongly oppose his amendment. I urge all my colleagues to vote no on this amendment. Do any other members wish to comment on the substitute amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? That's just bonkers. All right, seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Pappas substitute amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. The gentleman requests a recorded vote, and as pursuant to committee rules, the vote will be postponed. Okay, without objection, the motion to reconsider is late. After the vote. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 1815? Hearing none. Now, in order to consider H.R. 1960. I now call upon H.R. 1960, the Simplifying Veterans Assistance Act of 2025. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1960, to amend Title 38, United States Code to require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs.
The bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself in support of this legislation. This bill would update the guidance on how to apply for grant and per diem programs. The bill would also provide optional training on VA's website to help homeless providers apply for grants properly. Current laws do not provide any tools to assist homeless providers in completing grant applications, and this subcommittee has seen this create a barrier for small or rural organizations, while the organizations in more urban parts of the country are able to make most of those resources. As a result, smaller, more rural grant and per diem program providers miss out on grants an additional year of waiting before they can reapply. Additionally, veterans in rural areas may have to travel farther distances to use a grant and per diem program. Without clear guidelines and training on the VA's website, some veterans may not have equal access to homeless resources. Do any members wish to comment on HR 1960? The chair now recognizes Ranking Member Pappas for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've seen progress being made in terms of decreasing veteran homelessness across the country in recent years. But after decreasing for a number of years and the lapse of the authorities granted during the pandemic, my state, New Hampshire, saw an increase last year in the number of homeless veterans. It's my hope that our work on the Elizabeth Dole Act last year, finally authorizing an increase in payments to homelessness providers, that we can turn the tide. I also call on this committee to consider Ranking Member Takano's End Veteran Homelessness Act as soon as possible. So I'll be supporting the Simplifying Veterans Assistance Act of 2025, but I urge this committee to do more than technical assistance. Our veterans deserve it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Do any members wish to offer an amendment to HR 1960? The chair now recognizes Ranking Member Pappas.
Well, out of respect for Representative Ramirez, who's in another markup, I'd like to offer an amendment, which I believe is at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to HR 1960, offered by Mr. Pappas. Add at the end of the bill the following.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with and without objection so ordered. The gentleman is now recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Urge colleagues to support the Ramirez amendment to HR 1960. The goals of her amendment and the underlying legislation are the same: to help veterans who are experiencing homelessness. Members of the committee will recall the months it took to pass the Elizabeth Dole Act into law. However, in the closing weeks before passage, we learned of a critical error in the package that would prevent the higher rate from being reimbursed to homeless providers. This was shared with the committee, but it didn't make it into the package in time before it was enacted into law. Her amendment provides VA with their requested edit. And so if you supported the provisions of the Dole Act to end veteran homelessness, you should support the Ramirez amendment. So with that, I urge support and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. This amendment would increase authorizations for the grant and per diem program through 2036 without any debate on what the spending level should be. And there's been a 55% decrease in veteran homelessness over the last decade, but this amendment is going to authorize a significant increase in funding. So here's what I'm going to do with this. I do not support this in its current form. And Mr. Pappas and I have a history. I voted against something that he wanted in last Congress, and I said, I'm going to work with you. And then we actually crafted it better, in my opinion, sir. And then it got through committee. And I'm going to commit to Ms. Ramirez, who's unfortunately in another committee hearing, she's my dear friend, to work with her directly with her office to make this ready for prime time. Because I understand her intent, and her intent is your intent, and is also my intent of decreasing veterans' homelessness. It's just that this particular amendment at the current time is not ready for prime time. So I'll work with her directly just like I did with you, pal. Cool? Thank you. All right, you got it. So with that said, I strongly oppose this amendment, and I encourage my colleagues to vote no with me. Do any members wish to comment on this amendment? Seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment to HR 1. So is this the Ramirez or the Pappas amendment now? It will be a Pappas, okay. So the question now occurs to agreeing on the Pappas amendment, HR 1960. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. The gentleman requests a recorded vote, and it's pursuant to committee rules, the vote will be postponed. The motion, okay, are there no amendments, no additional amendments were filed? Are there any further amendments? We're good. Hearing none, we'll now move to consider the postponed business. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Ooh. On the substitute amendment number 1 to the ANS to HR 1815, the subcommittee postponed further proceedings on Pappas substitute amendment number 1 to the amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 1815. The question occurs to agreeing to the amendment. Members will record their vote using the electronic voting system. Again, I will be voting no on this amendment. Oh. I now yield to the ranking member. What do I need to do? Just, you want to tell your people how you're going to vote?
Oh, I'll be voting yes.
Okay, there you go. How about that? All right. The clerk will now open the vote on the Pappas substitute number 1. I think we already jumped the gun here. To the amendment in the nature of substitute HR 1815.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, there will be no proxy voting for Mr. Kennedy. Do any members, have all members voted? And do any members wish to change their vote? I think so. Hearing none, the clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 ayes and 5 nays.
Okay. There are 3 ayes and 5 nays. The amendment is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. On the substitute amendment number 2 to the ANS to HR 1815, the subcommittee postponed further proceedings on the Pappas substitute amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 1815. The question occurs on agreeing to the amendment. Members will record their vote using the electronic system. I, as the chairman, will be voting no on this amendment. The chair now recognizes Mr. Pappas.
I'll be voting yes.
The clerk will now open the vote on the Pappas substitute amendment number 2 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 1815. Have all members voted? Do any members wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 ayes and 5 nays.
There are 3 ayes and 5 nays. The amendment is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 1815 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those, yes. All those, in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment to the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Way up. I now recognize Mr. Barrett for a motion.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee forward HR 1815 as amended favorably to the full committee.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. HR 1815 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The committee postponed further proceedings on amendment to HR 1960 offered by Mr. Pappas. The question occurs on agreeing to this amendment. Members will record their vote using the electronic system. The chairman intends to vote no on Mr. Pappas's amendment. The chair now recognizes Mr. Pappas.
And I intend to vote yes.
All right. The clerk will open the vote on the Ramirez amendment to HR 1960. Have all members voted? Do any members wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 ayes and 5 nays.
There are 3 ayes and 5 nays. The amendment is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I recognize Representative Barrett for a motion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee forward HR 1960 favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward HR 1960. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and HR 1960 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Okay. I ask unanimous consent that committee staff should be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bills favorably forwarded today. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I thank the members for their attendance today. The subcommittee is now adjourned.